You might have turned it up because you need to aim it towards yourself. He heard it.
Oh, okay.
Just move it a little closer.
Okay. Should we just maybe, well, I'm calling the meeting to order. Oh, maybe we should review Zoom procedures first. Do we need to do that and then make
No, we'll be
Okay.
fine. Could
Okay.
be the only people on our
planning
planning
commissioner?
commissioners.
Okay, well, maybe then should we just introduce ourselves for Tim and just go around? I'm Ariane Sam. I am now the chair because nobody else wanted to do it. But if you ever have aspirations for chair, just saying it's,
Jump straight in.
yeah, you could jump straight in anytime. I work at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and I guess I've been on the Planning Commission the longest of anyone, but I can't remember what year I started.
Even Aaron.
Yeah, 2019.
It has to be you two because you're the only two ones who have nameplates.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, there I
I
am.
think we came in 2018.
Oh, okay. Oh my God. Wow.
That's how long it's been. Maybe even 17, but I think 18 for sure.
Yeah. Aaron, do you want to go next and just introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Hi, Tim. I'm Aaron Kasicki. Tim and I are actually neighbors. We live right down the street from one another.
Oh, okay.
So hi, Tim.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Oh, I'm Maria Arsenis. We also know each other. I'm
Okay.
technically vice chair of the commission.
Okay.
So I'm Mike Miller. I'm the planning director of the city. Been here for, as I said, 10.5 years.
Oh.
I'm Leah Candland, and I was the newest person on the list until Tim. So nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Yeah, and I'm Tim Sinnott, and happy to be here. Happy to join in all of the work that needs to get done. I've been in Montpelier for a dozen years. I work remotely for an organization that does mapping, so that's one of the things I'm excited about helping and bringing to the commission. But also just a love of the city and wanting to help out.
Okay, great. And we have one more commissioner, is Sean.
Hi, Tim. I'm Sean. I've only been on here since May, but we've had a lot of turnover since then. So I guess you get seniority pretty fast.
And
Yeah.
Gabe Lajeunesse is the one commissioner who's missing tonight. He didn't tell me he wasn't going to make it, but
Okay.
didn't make it.
Yeah, holiday week. Okay. So we have an agenda in front of us. Would anyone like to move approval of the agenda?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Motion by Sean, second by Maria.
I know the audio is a little different tonight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Can I make a quick question really quickly
Uh-huh.
before we do that? Sorry, I'm a little late. I'm sure most of you, if not all of us, have received some additional information from Steve. Is there any want or need, do you think, to put that on the agenda and have further discussion, or is that something we can table to a later meeting?
I guess, yeah, I hadn't really.
Steve is here,
about
so
that.
some of that might be brought up tonight in the
Yeah, probably
conversation. I didn't get
General.
copies of it, so it's something you guys would have to go and let me know.
Okay, that's helpful. I
related to
I
something
didn't
in
know
here.
Steve was there, so that's why I didn't know if we needed to. But if he's there, I'm sure we'll probably hear something from him. So
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as usual, I'm ill prepared. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good question. But as Mike said, Steve is here, so maybe during general business we can cover that. So comments from the chair. Just gonna say I think we all received the email from Steve, but since he's here, let's talk about it in general business. And I did also receive an email from Peter Kelman about just sharing that about there was an article in Vermont Digger about what Rutland is doing for housing recently, so I will forward that around, but at some point, if we ever get around to it, I think it would be interesting to hear more about what Rutland's done with their planning and zoning, because I think they did focus on really stripping down some regulatory barriers. So that's just a point. And did
I
you
actually
all
read
get,
that article.
you did
and
read the
I was
article?
I was gonna bring it up too.
Okay.
When did it happen or go into effect? Is it a recent change?
I'm not sure the article said about the planning and zoning changes. Do you know, Mike?
It sounded like they were going through the process, so I
Oh,
I don't know if they're. My guess is if we were to look at the zoning, they're probably they're probably not farther ahead than we are.
I was like, how did it turn out? You don't know. Okay.
There's a lot of these articles that get written, they're like, oh, they passed their zoning, they're gonna do all this stuff. And it's like, well, we passed our zoning 6 years ago. And we're still waiting for the convoy of builders to show up.
Yeah.
But it looked like they had 2 points. One was the regulatory changes, which we've already done. And the second piece was that they were looking at trying to come up with a system for offering low interest loans to builders to try to help to defray the cost. Because obviously, if you're taking out loans at 8 or 9%, that's money that increased the cost of the housing down the road. So if they were able to get money to the builders, that might be able to keep the costs down. We've talked about this in the office as an idea, but it looks like they may have some source of funding. Certain places have easier times getting certain funding, Berry City, Rutland, St. Johnsbury, just because they have a lower income census. Yeah.
Tracks or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Their census tracts qualify them for certain things that we don't qualify for. So I'm not entirely sure where they're getting the funding, but even with the funding, we're not sure. I wish them the best, and I hope it does work out, but I'm not sure. Their housing costs are so low that I can't imagine it costs less to build in Rutland than it would be in, Rutland town. It's just, it doesn't seem like the costs would be less. They would be the same. And that the housing units are 180 to 230,000, I think that article said. I just can't imagine you're building much in that price range. You're going to probably try to be doing a lot of renovations and trying to work in that framework. So it's interesting. We're always looking for ideas. But the idea of trying to defray the cost of capital, getting money, is something we've talked about, but we just don't know where we would get a large enough sum of money that it would make a substantial difference in the cost, or in the production. We get a certain number, 20 units a year that come online. But how much money would it take to get that up to a much higher number?
Yeah, and I also feel like a lot of those applications to that housing pool may not actually turn into developments. I mean, they're plans right now. Not to be, I'm very working in housing, I'm very gloomy about it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, it just exactly what Mike said. It costs way more than what you could recoup as a
Yeah.
private developer. I think, and maybe except for Chittenden County. It's just really tough in the rest of the state, I think.
Speaking
But I
of
would be
which-
interested to hear where they are in
Yeah.
terms of their planning. and
Would
zoning.
be interesting to see
Yeah.
how things turn out
Yeah.
down the road. Again, these are the same types of ideas. If they were to look at the city of Montpelier, like, well, look at what the city of Montpelier is doing. They bought Country Club Road. It's like, well, that's buying it as one piece, actually getting it developed is another. Coming up with an idea to subsidize housing construction in your community is one thing. Actually following through and getting that program in place and having it work is going to be the next step to see how well they do. But I hope they do great. It is an idea, as I said, that we had thought about, and if they can make it work, that's great.
Well,
I wanted to ask about the RFP for that lot next to the drawing board. Has
Yes.
anything happened with that yet?
No, we've had
Or
no,
waiting?
no responses yet.
No response? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is there a time period for the RFP?
Josh is the one working on it. I want to say it's sometime in December.
Oh, okay, so there might still be time,
There might still be time.
but you haven't heard any.
I haven't heard any, we've had nobody, no,
Clarification,
nobody, no
entry?
biting on it yet.
All right.
And then I was just gonna mention one more thing and then pass it to Maria. Did you guys get, I don't know if it's of interest, but I got something from the CVRPC about a land use planning. Or a
Oh.
land use,
Yeah.
informative, session on December 19th. Did you guys get that or should I forward that? Okay, I'll forward that
That'd be great.
around. It's on a Thursday evening, December 19th. At 6 p.m. So could be a tough time, but sounds like a good session. And one of the things they mentioned was going over the designations, which is of interest because we've been hearing about it for Country Club Road. So
Yeah. Is it only open to commissioners? Like who can go?
No, it's open.
It's open.
yeah, I think all the planning commissioners certainly could go. Oh, there's Gabe. Hi, Gabe.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
all right.
I wasn't sure if people were already on the list, so I will forward that around. And then Maria, you wanted to update us on.
Oh, yeah, I just want to update everyone on what's been going on with the bike path. So Ariane and I met with the homelessness task force. My husband is on the Complete Streets Committee, so that's an easy meeting that we can have. I also met with Rebecca Copans, and she's the chair of the Housing Commission. And we are both meeting with the police chief next week, just to see like what his read on the entire situation is and what we can do to even prevent these situations from arising in the first place. And then MRPS invited me to come to the high school and sit in the library and talk to kids and see what their experiences have been, because it's really hard. It's been really hard to get that kind of contact because kids aren't telling their parents and they aren't telling adults. And I've just been asking them directly because I work with a lot of kids. So I'm curious to see what they say. And I've heard that it's gotten better. I don't know if like anyone has, but the kids have been reporting that like it hasn't been like 30 people hanging out on the bike path, which is what it was before. So I'm curious to see what they think about that too. If they're like actually using the bike path to get to school again, or if it's still off limits.
Is there seasonality to the bike path use?
I know, I'm
though?
curious about that.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, if it is.
I think the homelessness task force talked about that, how there is like a winter shelter that opens. Right?
Oh, yeah. And
There is a seasonality to the
Yeah.
shelters.
But I don't know. I mean, it's not, well, I don't know if it's open during the day.
Yeah. But yeah, that's also something to ask about too, I think. So again, I'm just trying to do research so that we're well informed about what's happening. And then what Rebecca and I kind of thought up is like if all of the city commissions can come up with their own way of solving it, of like addressing this issue, the safety issue. And like give concrete proposals to city council of what can be done about it. Like long-term, not just like a police sweep, like an actual like long-term solution to how isolated it is there, how unused it currently is. That if we can all give city council some concrete steps that we might see improvement in the future. As even Rebecca said, like, or an apartment building right there, like there's plenty of ways to make it a more usable space. More highly trafficked space, I guess. So
I guess I'm curious what your meeting with the police chief is going to. Because I thought we were sort of approaching it from a design perspective, so I'm
Yeah.
not sure like.
well, I know. So Rebecca brought that up and she was curious, like what they have heard, like what they perceive their role to be here. Because I think currently it's like the only department in the city that's like actively there, which I don't think should be the case, but I think that is what's happening. just to get his read on it. I don't know. I don't really know what we're going to hear or get out of it. But I think I'm curious to see like what. I mean, I'm sure, like, I have a feeling that we might go in there and the police department may say like, yeah, we don't actually want to be doing this. You know, like, which, like, or like, we don't think this should be our role. Like, I think there's a lot of things that they could say that wouldn't be entirely unsurprising. But I don't know. He's already said that he hasn't really heard these things from kids, which isn't surprising either, because kids aren't telling their parents or teachers. It's definitely not getting to the police department, you know? So I don't know. You can come with us if you'd like.
Yeah, I might be, when is it? I might be interested in
It's
coming.
next week, December, I think December 5th. I can send you.
Okay.
It's more just like, it's information gathering.
Yeah.
From all the different groups that have like intersected there. But yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, I mean, obviously you're doing a lot of this just as a parent and an interested citizen, but I don't, yeah, I guess I'm not sure. Have to think about it a little bit more, but the planning commission interacting with the police department, I don't know how I feel about that or what I think about that.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It's for the precautioning on there, because it wasn't the homelessness task force you met with, it was the chair and vice chair, not even a designated subcommittee of the homelessness task force. So I was listening to their meeting where they described the same meeting. But
You'll have to be at one of the microphones for the public to hear you.
Is there public? Oh, yes, you have. Well, I wanted to reserve my time to talk about other stuff, but this is an area that I've been involved in. The reason that there's no activity over there now is because the police strong-armed everybody under threat of arrest, which is a violation of civil liberties for the people who weren't making any trouble. And everybody's complacently allowing that to happen in our, righteous town. So I'm not complacent about that, because there are people that are peaceable that hang out there because they got nowhere else to go. And the folks that are in the shelter are not folks that aren't in the shelter for either personal reasons or have lost the privilege of the shelter are still outside. And so that's a complex situation that we've created by neglecting our responsibilities to have the homelessness task force accomplish anything in 5 years. So yes, there's a stronger role for the planning commission to find shelter, but most of these responses, the police will tell you, we've had 1,000 calls. A more important question would be, how many of them do you respond to with a cruiser role, and how many of them might have been better handled by a mental health professional or just a community service, de-escalator, right? So
that is one of my questions, because I've heard that there is a social worker that works for the city, but they work under the police department.
Yeah, they're embedded and they're shared with
Which is kind of
Barry,
like an
and so it's a
interesting,
very
like,
limited, and it takes a long time to
So
get
like stuff
there.
like that I want to get information about. Like, does the city have a social worker? And why would they report to the police department? Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess because we don't really have a public, I mean, just my,
That is like,
we don't have any other venue for public
Right.
safety.
yeah.
So we're trying to incorporate more social work and mental health first aid in the police, but okay, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
say that about the meeting, but it sounds interesting, and I'm sure.
I just want to know how things work. So
Okay.
that's why I'm just nosy. I want to know how it works and like what their direction has been from city council.
Oh, okay.
I feel like or I've at least been very consistent saying, I don't think this is a law enforcement issue. But if that's the only lever that they think they have to pull, then that's the lever they're going to pull,
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see like how it's functioning from that side.
Another relevant piece is that the city recently, I believe it targeted at me, put a paywall between us and the public records of the reports. You should read the incident reports that the police have collected. And now they're $10 a piece or $45 for a body cam video. And they always run the body cam video. So I've encouraged the folks who have been illegally displaced from the bike path to get the body cam video of them being displaced and based, you know? Somebody needs to stand up for the rights of the least powerful and most vulnerable. And if y'all are gonna get involved at all, I'd ask you to keep that perspective in mind.
I mean, to me, though, the least powerful in the situation are like the 11-year-olds that are getting. I mean, it's not a matter of children feeling scared walking past there. It's like the matter of children actually being threatened and chased and followed.
And yes.
You know,
we
so
should
like
have
to me,
video
an
camera.
11-year-old is a much more vulnerable
Yes.
person
And I'd like to.
than an
read the-
adult, you
I think
know.
reading the incident report of that and figuring, I don't need the name.
This is what I'm saying. It's not in the incident reports. These kids are not telling adults what's happening. So that's why I had to go into the schools. And that's why I'm talking to children
Sure.
individually. Like they aren't even telling their parents what has happened.
Well, then it's hearsay. It's like, is it really even happening?
Well, no one's going to jail over it.
No, but I'm just saying that.
I mean,
think
hearsay is
we've-
illegal. step.
We whipped it into a lot of hearsay without any evidence. And
The evidence is what children are telling us.
I thought they weren't telling you.
They are telling me.
Okay, all right.
They aren't telling their parents. They definitely are not telling the police department.
Okay, I'm all for protecting the children and teaching them to a proper, appropriate response if someone says something rude to them, right?
Which is what?
Oh, I don't know. I mean,
I mean, I don't think there is an appropriate response because I don't think that should be said to them in the first place.
well, I'm just saying that we've created this situation by leaving people outside until they've gotten so desperate
Yeah.
and disinhibited that they're abusing each other and potentially saying rude things to children.
I think we
which
all agree.
It's
on
not
it.
okay,
Right.
but I'm saying, let's look at the root cause.
Right, and that's what I'm hoping all of the commissions can kind of work together on, is like a bigger, long view solution to this. So,
Okay, all right,
Sorry.
well, let's. Thank
I
you.
I just have a quick question really quickly, and I appreciate all the information gathering efforts that you're doing, Maria. I think it's a real issue that deserves to be delved into as much as possible. But to the extent that you're having meetings A at the school and B with the police department, I just want to be clear: are you doing that under the aegis of as like a representative of the planning commission?
no, I mean, I introduced myself as, you know, a mother in RMRPS, as a small town, like a downtown business owner, also vice chair of the planning commission. I've been gathering data to bring to the planning commission. So Aaron's thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've voiced this in an email earlier, and I just think it bears repeating, and I'm going to keep repeating this, is I have real serious reservations about our authority under Title 24 to what our options are to impact this situation. I don't think it's a transportation issue. It's clearly a public health and safety issue. I just think we need to be, before we start engaging with other commissions and whatnot, we need to have a very serious discussion amongst this group and figure out what we are comfortable doing and not doing. Because again, I agree this is an issue that is going to take a multi-pronged approach from various agencies, commissions, and various other components of the city apparatus. I just don't see how we have the authority to do much about this. And I'm willing to have that debate, but I would rather have that discussion prior to anyone making representations about what we might do in the future in conjunction with anybody else. So, and I'm not trying to dissuade you from having these meetings at all. I'm just saying, like, I think that there is a threshold issue as to what we can and can't do under the law, that I think we need to have a pretty thorough discussion about to figure out what options we have. So,
Okay, I mean, should we put that on a future agenda, or does anybody else have thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think so. I put it on a future
know.
agenda because I don't.
I think we were planning on putting on a future agenda, but then
Yeah.
all of these public meetings
Yeah.
started taking place.
And I think it's relevant to this whole country club road issue too. I don't know if you agree, Aaron, but like what our role would be, or what our
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is, and Mike did this, I think it was probably back in it was not that long ago. I feel like it was probably in the summer. We did have a discussion about sort of kind of, I guess I would call it the enabling statute under Title 24, was it 43? I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it gives us what our scope of authority and jurisdiction is, both under the city charter and under Title 24. Like, I think it's just helpful, especially now that we have some new folks on board, to just have kind of a baseline discussion about what the real core functions of the commission are. And I am happy to sort of test the boundaries of what we can and can't do, but I just think we need to all have that discussion and be in agreement about that stuff before. I just don't want to get too far out in front of your efforts, Maria, only to kind of come to the conclusion that we can't really do the things that we may have thought that we did. And I certainly don't want to be in a position where anybody here has sort of made representation to anybody else about what we could and couldn't do, and then only to realize we can't do it. So that's just a long-winded way of saying, like, yeah, I would be in support of putting something on the agenda and the next meeting or two, and really drill down on this subject and sort of get a better sense of what we think we can and can't do, both with respect to the bike path issue and probably to the country club road issue that you're talking about. So.
Okay, so I guess, Mike, we could maybe before, I don't know, well, let's talk about at the end of the meeting, like when, I don't know what our schedule is in terms of like trying to get some of these public sessions, so maybe yeah, I don't know when would be the best time to have that discussion. And Mike, do you feel comfortable advising us on that and sending us the statute? I mean, I know Aaron's a lawyer, so he's like, I don't know.
I am too.
Yes, and Maria, I'm sorry. He's
practicing.
He's practicing.
Okay.
Or your approach, I guess I meant to say Aaron is approaching it, I think, from a legal, or maybe you are too.
Oh.
You are too.
I think we have different, it's fine, but this is why we bring it to the commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like I said, I don't doubt that we have disagreements about this, but I think it just warrants a larger discussion so that we can make a unified decision, like as a commission, about what we're going to do, as opposed to have some people doing some things and other people saying, I don't want to do that. So.
I mean, Mike, to my question, do you feel comfortable leading us in that discussion, or?
Yeah, because I mean, I think for the most part, everything that's going on now is perfectly fine. Maria just doing information gathering to bring back, and at some point we can put it on an agenda to have a conversation of, okay, what's the path going forward? What are we going to do now that we have the information? What do we, here's what we know. Is there something within our sphere of influence that we should be working on, or are we just going to support other agencies or other things? And there can be the conversation of what we have the ability to influence. And I think broadly, planning commissions can have, planning commissions in other communities could recommend, it's not related to this, but noise ordinances and other things that go, the council should do this, or select board should do that. It's not necessarily something the planning commission would end up enforcing. So what would we do here? I think we could advise council on things, but we don't have direct ability to impact it. We would have to be working through somebody else to go through and say, planning commission supports these avenues of solving it. And it could be something I'd put into the city plan. It could be something I'd put into a different document. I mean, I can't see there's going to be a zoning solution. I can't see that there's going to be, I think there's going to be challenges to see where we would have direct authority to make changes. But planning commissions, I think, broadly have a lot of power to try to go through and talk about things. So
I'm just curious, Aaron, while we're talking about this, what do you do you feel like making recommendations to city council is in your read of the statute under the?
I mean, I don't have it in front of me and it's been a little bit of time since I have, so take this with a huge grain of salt, but I mean, my initial read of it was, my primary concern is this, is we surely have, my read of it as the best I recollect, we have the authority to make recommendations to the city council about transportation issues, but I don't think that that spills over into sort of concerns about public health, like public safety, which I think that this sort of really bleeds more into that. And I'm, and it's what it boils down to this, is I think that we clearly have the authority to make recommendations about, what infrastructure should be cited, for transportation, like we could certainly say, we think a bike path is appropriate to be here, and here's, we can make the necessary sort of design changes to accommodate that, make those recommendations to the city council. I worry that what we're moving into is making recommendations about who can use it, like, and under what sort of circumstances those things can be used. And I think that's just, it gets very sticky very quickly. And I appreciate that this is going to be an interdisciplinary and multi-pronged effort from a lot of the, town resources to address these issues going forward. But I just really am hesitant to sort of make recommendations about what we think we can do in a public safety sphere. And I do think that that's sort of outside of our authority. I just don't see that in my read of the statute. And and I'm not saying that there's not room for it. I just want to make sure that we're all clear about what the contours of that is before. Because I think the other piece too is like, I'm sure, Maria, you want to do this partially because you have concerns, like personal concerns, which I think are very valid, but like, I don't want you to take a laboring oar in doing all this work under the assumption that we would make certain recommendations. I'd rather have the discussion now so that we all have sort of a paradigm under which to do this additional work, and have scoped it out rather than do it the other way around.
So, Erin, were you at the meeting that we talked about this? I feel like you may have been traveling.
This is the one where we didn't have a quorum
that week.
Yeah, that was the one. I was there for part of it, but I don't think for that part of it.
I think the recommendations that we were thinking, of was like mowing down the weeds. It wasn't like, it was a very kind of surface level discussion of like what can be done to just like improve that atmosphere.
Sure, and that's fair, and if that's the case, great. But we didn't have a quorum at that meeting, so we didn't have many people there in the first place. We have new people that are just come on board, so I think this is a good opportunity to sort of revisit what the core roles of the planning commission are in the context of a real sort of live issue, so to speak. And we can have those discussions. I just think it would be helpful right now, because it is, to me, it's just, this could be fraught with some issues that I think we can get out in front of if we just have this discussion amongst ourselves. And I'm not saying you or anybody else is wrong in having a different read with any of this stuff. I am by nature just cautious about these things when I, look at Title 24. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it makes sense for, all of us to also come up with, like Mike was saying, like now that we know this, what can we do? Like what is in our authority to do about this? And that could be nothing, I would still pursue it personally because I do, like I talk to these kids and it's terrifying and I want to make it better for them, even if the planning commission doesn't think that they have anything to do with it. So
sure.
I think,
sure. And like I said, I just think that having that discussion sooner rather than later, it helps us figure out what the planning commission feels comfortable attaching, the planning commission kind of title to recommendations versus what you want to do on your own. And that, I just think it's just helpful, and it would just sort of create some clarity for everybody as we sort of continue to talk about this, which I'm sure is going to be a thread that binds what we do for a while now. It's going to be, this is going to be issue that lurks in the background, I think, for a while.
Right. Yeah, well, it seems like you said, you're pursuing it anyway, so you're not, or you feel like you would like to pursue it anyway, so.
I mean, I would.
Well, yes.
I don't want
We
to
don't-
be.
Yeah, right, no, you
But-
don't want to.
But I've heard enough kids say stuff to me about it. I feel compelled to because I mean, I worry about them. So I mean, my hope is that eventually I would be able to present all of my findings to the planning commission and that we could have a meeting where we discuss what can we do about this, if anything, you know, and that we would all come to an agreement on what we can do. And if that's nothing, then that's, you know, then that is the resolution. But if there is something that we could do and sign like a letter jointly to city council, that would also be great. Like, I want to be able to provide you all with like as much information as I can on what I think the issue is and what solutions I think are out there so that everyone can decide what to do.
No, that's helpful. And I was just going to say the thing is that because you were giving sort of an update about those efforts in the planning commission, as part of the planning commission meeting, it may be I sort of perked up because I'm like, I want to make sure that is this part of a planning commission effort? Is it part of an effort that you're doing on your own? And so this has been helpful to have this discussion here.
Okay.
But I still think that whether that's sooner or later, preferably sooner, we should sit down and sort of take a look at Title 24 in the town charter and kind of just make sure that we feel comfortable conceptually about what we can and can't do as we might think about specific options going forward.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like now that we've been talking, it seems like to me, if Maria presents us with the information and some recommendations, to me, that's easier to make a decision about can we do this? Because it's a little more concrete rather than abstract. So I would support just that process.
Right. And I didn't want it to be a situation where like Maria's doing what? Because I just want to let you guys know what meetings I had planned. So you weren't caught off guard in any way, that like she's doing what at the high school, So that was my goal, just to apprise all of you of my continuing research.
Yeah, and that was kind of my reaction when I just heard that. So
Right, and I had
I got out ahead of it. I got out ahead of it, Erin. I saw it coming.
Right, I had the same reaction about the police.
I know you did.
So good. I'm glad that we had this discussion. I think it's, yeah. And I don't know, that seems like if a planning commissioner wants to, investigate an issue and then come back and present to the board about something, that does seem, now that we've talked through it, I think it seems appropriate.
But you're not doing it on behalf of the planning commission. That's probably
No.
where it creates.
Right.
Your seat on the planning commission is useful to inform your colleagues, but it might be misleading if you are interpreted even erroneously as representing the planning commission in these meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I do because I know that. I mean, that's a fine line, but
I didn't mean to suggest you do. That's the caution. And I looked through the statute and there isn't anything about public safety or health that anchors in your powers and duties. So I'm happy to provide, I've got copies of a different section, but this one you're looking to powers and duties of planning commissions is 4325.
I mean, even if it's not explicitly in the statute, we are helping produce a city plan that is talking about public safety.
Correct.
Well, we are involved in planning.
Yeah, and health, I mean, I
And
don't-
urban design.
yeah, is part of all that. So anyway, but
Especially areas that are safe or risky in town and how to address those vulnerabilities.
all right, so I think we should move on to general business unless anyone else has anything else. Oh, well, that was the chair anyway. Okay,
I want to be general business.
okay, all right.
So I pulled, how many of y'all have been presented a copy of the planning manual. Anybody read it? Besides Mike?
Oh, this is from,
Oh, to the mic? Oh,
this is from ACCD.
yeah, the planning manual is put out by ACCD in 2 volumes, module 1 and module 2. It's too much for me to print. I asked them if they had any printed copies, and they got back to me today and said they don't. So I think it would be a good investment because it lays out methodically and in detail the kind of considerations you're wrestling with, and who, in effect, I think what I said at the first meeting I came to about this new web storyboard process being ineffective, that's evidenced by the lack of participation in these meetings. This is supposed to be a public input meeting on some modules of it, and nobody's here but me. And I got a couple other sections of it, brief sections I printed out. And they're useful because I don't think Mike should be driving the bus here. I think the commission needs to be driving the bus, and y'all need to be giving direction to Mike of what you want in the plan. And whether or not the public participation is effective enough, and what else needs to be done. But I'm really wanting to focus, because in the interest of time, I'm wanting to focus on the Country Club Road module, because the last piece that's left to be written and presented is the land use plan, and that's where we keep hearing Country Club Road's going to be included. But just before the meeting convened tonight, I had a discussion here with Mike, and if I understood correctly, the city's stance right now is that they put in an application for an expanded growth center, and it was revoked. And now they're going to rest on that application and any little ads that might come in, versus go back to the statute and read the statute and see what needs to be in there. And it all needs to be in there. That's the handout. The non-italicized stuff in the thing I sent you speaks to what needs to be included in there. And a growth center has to combine commerce and retail and industry, and you don't get it just as a place to build housing and play frisbee. Time is of the essence to get a growth center in a TIF district, or the taxpayers are going to force us to sell that property. Okay, a lot of people aren't happy that we bought it in the first place. Many people are doubting whether the city has the capacity to develop it, or even to entice a developer to come. And that's where the vision of what would it look like if it included all the things that a growth center and a TIF require: job creation, working opportunities there, housing, civic buildings. And what I'm hearing from the city is they're not going to proceed to develop a master plan for that property. They're going to see what they can get away with and try to build high priority housing, 40 units of high priority housing. And I think that would be a huge mistake. And there's also under consideration selling the building that's right at the core of it in some of the most level developable land to a pickleball, tennis club, virtual sports. And that would be a huge mistake before we've done our due diligence and figured out what is it going to take to meet the requirements of a growth center and potentially a new town center. I think I've made the argument that because of its location and it's not contiguous, a new town center is probably our best bet, and we will need a legislation to enable that for a town that already has a town center. And so there's language drafted that is being reviewed towards that end. But it would take, and it's in the summary at the back, at the last page of what I sent you, that it would take this planning commission getting their head around it and saying, yes, we want to develop a master plan for that. And what are we going to need in budget? What are we going to need? Who are we going to need to hire? When do we get started? What have we done or not done with the next steps as recommended by the consultant we hired years ago, the next steps chapter? And why haven't we done those things? You know, I've watched under this administration over 30 years, almost every project gets screwed up, you know? From the car lot, from the transit center, from the French's Block, from the district heat system. So here's a time where this country club property is too important to let it get screwed up, you know? So y'all are gonna have to take the reins here and decide whether you want to insist on a master plan as part of this. We could also find that we don't get the regional planning commission support without a master plan. So we could finish our municipal plan and serve it up and say, oh, this is what we intend to do over there, by the way, but it's not in the plan. They're not going to approve it. So I would encourage you to invite the regional planning commission to bring some expertise to present to you on growth center requirements and new town center requirements. And if you decide those are a good fit, that's going to totally change your work over the next 3-4 months, because you're going to have to get real focused on filling out an entire chapter that Mike clearly doesn't have the capacity. He said we'd have to hire some help. He doesn't have the capacity to do it. So I think that's most of what I wanted to say. I've given you a lot to read, and I've given that to ACCD commissioner, and he passed it to his team. I got that email back this morning. So the same thing you've read, they're reading. And I think it's useful to focus the discussion, because it'll probably focus their discussion on what they tell Mike we need next. But taking an old application from the original growth center and saying what did and didn't happen in varying degrees without applying it to the expansion. And the statute requires that an expansion of a growth center has to be done as if it were a new application. So for the most part, we don't have to worry about the rest of the growth center. We need to focus an entire detailed application on Country Club Road. And if it's a concurrent application for a new town center for resilience purposes, as to our safety zone during the next floods, we have to have that in by September. So that's a lot to throw at you. I hope to be here, be invited if you're going to discuss it. If not tonight, then another time.
Sorry, look at me on the chair. I'm not sure that I'm an introvert, so it takes me a while to like piece together my thoughts. But if other planning commissioners have reactions or thoughts that you want to share at this time, the floor is open.
Well, maybe Mike could update us on what the city is hoping. I had read that city council was hoping to move forward with a new application in the spring, and also, Steve is saying that it has to be a new town center, and it's not clear to me why a growth center expansion that would be part of a larger existing growth center that included all of the things that he was talking about in terms of commerce and housing and municipal buildings and all of that stuff. Why Country Club Road wouldn't qualify being part of the larger growth center.
Because it's not adjacent.
Well, I mean, I do feel like
But
Mike already addressed this.
it is adjacent to the existing growth center.
Right, and I feel like Mike gave us I understood Mike to say that we tried to include it in the growth center or add it to the growth center. That didn't work. To continue with that designation, which is going to expire, and I forget how many years, is going to cost the city a lot of money. There's a lot of new designation programs coming. So why not? Is that Am I remembering right?
Yeah, I mean, we have to make a decision once we find all the facts of what it's going to cost and what it's going to require. There are a lot of pieces of an application that I can do, but there are other pieces that require consultant help to be able to do. If I have to do a housing analysis, that's not but that requires a consultant. If you're going to do certain economic analyses, then that's going to require something else. If they want to build out analysis, that's something that would require hiring a consultant to be able to do. So the question, when the 5-year update was put in, as a part of the 5-year update, the application that was initially submitted, there are sections in that that say this is what happened in the 5-year update, and pertaining to the growth center expansion, here is the discussion. And that went through all the 10 or 12 pieces that were in that application. What we're waiting to find out from ACCD is which of these pieces, how much additional information do the analyses need to include, the entire growth center, the entire city, or just the application? Because the statute is silent. You think you just read the statute, you know everything. You don't read the statute and know everything. You read the statute and find out statute doesn't talk about this. Same thing that we had when we were writing zoning regulations. You think you've covered all the bases, and then someone comes and says, what about an application in this of this type? And you're like, oh, our rules don't really talk about that. So how do we handle that? That's how ACCD got into the issue in the first place. Was they were required to do 5-year updates, and the statute didn't lay out what a 5-year update was. So they had to make up rules. This is what you have to include in a 5-year update. So that's how some of these things come up, is you don't have, so by letting the board and their staff, who are going to be the people who give the staff recommendation on an application, you've got something in front of you. Tell us what you think about what we gave you. If you're telling us we need all 10, we do all 10. We will meet what they think is necessary in order to meet statutory requirements. They're the ones interpreting it. They're the ones we filled out their application form. They sent me an application form. They said, fill this out. I filled it out, sent it back to them. And so now we're just going to go through and say, all right, tell us what's missing. Is it 2 pieces or 10 pieces? Because that can impact how much it's going to cost to meet the requirement. And then we can go to council and say, what would you like us to do? I don't have the money. It's council and the public that makes the decision on money. And do you want me to proceed if it costs $5,000? They might say yes. Do you want me to proceed if it costs $40,000? Well, that's an entirely different question. So those are the things we're going to look at. So do we plan at this time to move forward with a growth center application after we get the city plan approved? Yes, that's right now. We expect that's what we're moving towards, because that's going to be the most efficient way of moving forward. It is the trigger right now in order for us to build out Country Club Road without asking the taxpayers to pay money, is to use a TIF. We would use a TIF to build out that infrastructure. We've already done the cost estimations, and I will send you all the links to the Country Club Road plan, which does exist. It's a big fat plan. But the way these plans work, these master plans, conceptual plans, we had called it a master plan. Member of council didn't like that name, so he changed it to an action plan or an actionable plan. Whatever you want to call it, it's a conceptual plan. The way these processes work, and you've probably been a part of some of these, is they're iterative. You're going to go through and say, we've talked to the public, and there was a lot of public input to go into this, to develop this plan of what would the public like to see, what do they don't want to see. And it came down to they're kind of blocked out. There's a large area that's on the top of the hill that's for townhouse type, and the lower area was going to be for up to 5-story dense housing. And then a section of about 10 acres, 12 acres was reserved for a community center and recreation. That's what came out of the public process. what we needed, that's what the public wanted. What we needed was to have the city council then go through and say, yes. Does that tell you exactly what's going to happen? No, but it gives you an idea of before we can start planning on how we're going to get there, we've got to know, all right, this is where the public wanted. Are you guys all on board with this? And they didn't vote to adopt, they accepted the plan. So we're going to go back and we're going to have to review to see, ask council to go through and adopt this as the conceptual plan moving forward. Because we have to have that taken off the table as you never adopted the plan. Well, we're gonna have that, get that step done. Because we're gonna have to, because we're applying for grants, millions of dollars in grants to fund those next steps. How do we get those next steps? We've done preliminary due diligence on the cost, and there are cost estimates in there. And these weren't numbers we made up. This is from VHB, with same company that does the work for Newtown Center and in South Burlington and all these ways. This is a professional, top of the line organization. They looked through, they came up with what the cost estimates would be. Again, we're looking at, back of the envelope, they come up with the number of millions of dollars and the amount of housing. And they said, yes, this could work for a TIF. The amount of infrastructure would be about this much. The amount of development would be about this much. It, without, ballpark, it would work. It was for them worth making the recommendation that said this, we recommend that this project move forward because it does make sense. If it didn't make sense, my department would be the first one to go through and say, this isn't going to make sense financially unless the city is willing to bond to build the infrastructure. This isn't going to work. According to the infrastructure, according to the numbers, they think it's going to work. It's all in this plan and we can lay it out. It's a very detailed plan. As much Stephen wants to say we haven't done anything, it's a very good plan for this step in the process. And it has a lot of the information you need to make that next thing. Does it have the designs of what the buildings are going to? No, because we have to first make that decision of what it is we want to do. Do we want to have 5-story buildings in the lower area and townhouses on the second area? And do we want to go through these processes? And we just need to have yes. Now, why this process and project hasn't moved forward? Steve will point out to you the fact that that plan was given to city council on like June 23rd of 2023. 2 weeks later, we had a massive flood. My office is destroyed. I lose all my files, all my computers, everything we have is destroyed. And we spend the next year not only putting my department back together again, but then spending all of our time on grants to rebuild Montpelier. So yes, as a priority, Country Club Road did take a second tier to that. We did try to move forward on a number of projects. We had to do the rezoning. We went through and rezoned. You two were part of that. Aaron was also part of that. Gabe was part of that. We had to rezone the area in order to be eligible to ask for the growth center application, and we did. We got that all approved. So that step was done. We did go forward and put together the growth center application. Again, we did it at the guidance of the state. The state staff did a staff review. They reviewed it and said it meets it. They recommended it for approval to the board before Steve came in and pointed out that the application process that ACCD was using was not in conformance with state law, and they backed down and they rescinded the approval. So that did take a lot of time to go through and do those processes. This hasn't been a process that is stopped. It's stopped because Steve pointed those things out. Otherwise, we would be moving on right now. We have the money in the budget to hire White and Burke to do the TIF application. We've stopped that because there's no sense doing the TIF application until we get the growth center. So that has been stopped. We have a contract right now. Well, we don't have the contract. We have a contract in hand that we are reviewing to do the due diligence to get the utilities. So again, VHB, the engineering firm, to bring the utilities up to the site to start doing the plans, the actual blueprints. We have an estimate. It's in the report, which I will send you. So we already have the estimates. Now they're going to go through and do the detailed work. Okay, what is a blueprint? How much pipe? What's it gonna cost? What's all this gonna do? We've got to put that level of detail in. And again, as we say, it's all iterative. You have to start with the big picture because we need to know big picture. What do you want, city council? What do we want, public? First, before we can then go through and run the pipe, because it doesn't make sense to put in a 10-inch pipe if you only need an 8-inch pipe. Or you wouldn't want to put in a 10-inch pipe and find out you needed a 12 because you were going to do more development. So that's why you do these conceptual plans, so you can start then doing the next iterative step of, okay, well, now that we're settled on this, we're going to do this. And each one's going to get more and more detailed as we get closer and closer to the final product. And that's the way this process is going to work. And so that's a little bit, but I will send you those 2 planning manuals. I can send you the links to those. I'll send you the link to the Country Club Road plan. Because I think it's important for you guys to have. That was it was a big process, and we can always take this up at another meeting if you've got specific questions. Once you have those in hand, then we can have a meeting and talk about specific questions.
Mike, I'm curious how responsive the board has been to looking through the application and seeing which parts needed.
The state board,
Yeah.
it's the staff that's looking. So there's state
Okay.
staff, and then there's a state board.
Well, I thought you said the board would get back to you about which parts of the application.
I should have
It's the
said the
staff.
staff. We're working with the staff at this point, and they're working with their legal counsel. And as we said, for us, because we had this large application that went in, you've got some information, it may be on point 1, good information. We need some backup supplemental information on X. Number 2 looks good as it is. Number 3 looks good as is. Number 4, we would need significant additional information on
But
it.
have they done that yet?
They haven't done that.
Okay,
No.
but you're anticipating they will.
Yeah, we asked them to do it, and part of their discussion with us was that they were going to look through our original application. Now, the application in April would be different than the application that went in last April. But we can go through and peel out those pieces if we know the application form is going to stay the same. Maybe they go through and say the application form is going to be completely different. We need to know. There's no process at this point. There is no application for an amendment. There never was. That was the 2012 decision. Before I was ever here, this was not written for us. These rules were written way before me, which were written that said, if you want to do an amendment follows the same rules as a 5-year adoption. Well, that turns out to not be correct, but that was the rule they said. That was the rule they followed for 12 years. And that was the rule I followed last year.
And then, sorry, Ariane, did you have a question?
No.
You said before, I think it was our last meeting, you said that the growth center originally included that whole property and much more. Montpelier
It
than
included
it, like,
other,
contracted?
it did not include Country Club Road,
Okay,
but it included many other parts. So the other parts, when Laura was here, she was talking about Town Hill Road and these other places that were now being put into the growth center.
yeah. Why was it
Those
constructed?
areas were already in the growth center.
Right.
And then there was opposition at the time. Again, I wasn't here in 2009.
Yeah,
My understanding was there was opposition at the time from VNRC and some of these other environmental groups that said the growth center is too big. It shouldn't be this big. It should have been smaller. So at the 5-year reunion, the 5-year update, which I was there for, that's 2014. So I show up in May, and like 2 weeks after I get here, I get this thing that says I've got to do the 5-year update.
okay,
So at that time, they said, the staff came out and said, we think it would be in your best interest, Montpelier, to avoid, there's going to be a lot of opposition coming in from environmental groups. It might be in your best interest to consolidate and shrink down your growth center to avoid some of that. We talked to Bill. We made a decision about the value of having that fight at that time. And again, I've been there like 2 weeks. So the decision at that time was we would try to make our growth center match our highest density zoning districts. And nobody was here at that time, but we were in the process of updating the zoning at that time, and that was really at the start. So 2014, they gave us a renewal, and they said, you got to come back when you get the new maps done, and which were in 2016. So 2 years later, we came back and we had to amend our growth center to make it smaller to match what were our
Okay.
like Res 6000. So before Res, not all of Res 9, but a lot of Res 9 were in, as well as out to the wayside in the Western Gateway and some other, there's quite a lot of area that was in the growth center. So it was shrunk down to try to target that. But at the time, the benefits of the growth center were much more limited. There weren't these Act 250 exemptions.
Mhm.
So we weren't seeing that. We were like, what are we fighting for?
Yeah.
Let's shrink it down. We'll consolidate it. That'll be fine. When we updated our city plan in 2017, we also made that reflect the growth center. That's what got us into trouble now,
Yeah.
which was that
Right.
you can't apply. That was Steve's point. You can't apply to put something into the growth center if it doesn't actually show it in the city plan. And that if that one point wasn't there, probably everything else would have been fine. We probably would have still gone through. But that was the main point that ACCD said. And at first they had a workaround. They said, well, we'll approve this, but it won't go into effect until you guys adopt your new city plan. That they eventually, as I said, withdrew all of that. That's how we kind of got to where we are, is that it was shrunk down and then we made our city plan match it. And then the benefits of being in the growth center improved. And we were like, oh, it really is to the advantage of the housing developers, because you can avoid, right now, it's everyone's always like, well, which I think we mentioned at the last meeting, it's big projects. It's not necessarily big projects. It's any project it's 5 units within 5 miles within 5 years. So if you're a small developer, you might buy a property in Berry City and one in Montpelier, and you might be within 5 miles of each other, in which case you trigger Act 250 on a small 4-unit project. And you're like, and it's that many in 5 years. So, if you do a couple of projects, doesn't take long. So even small developers who are just adding 2 units to an existing building get kicked into Act 250, and all the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars of analyses and studies and fees and everything else. And so the thought was, if we could get more area of the town into that Act 250 exemption, that's going to help us with our small developers. It's the big projects are still going to need to do Act 250. It's getting these small projects out. That was our main emphasis for these other areas. For Country Club Road, it was A, TIF, and B, we had to get out of Act 250. Not because we're trying to just get out of Act 250 for whatever reason. It's because the golf course, lower part of the golf course, is prime ag soils. And we know that because we've done our due diligence, and it's in that report. We did the entire Act 250 analysis in that report to go and determine that. That's why we have to get out of Act 250, is because it's in the report. So that's why we knew you can get those exemptions from prime ag soils, but you have to apply and go all the way through the process. And it's expensive to apply, and it's expensive to go through the process. So as the planning director, I have to go to the city council and the public and say, do we spend $250,000 to put together an Act 250 application on the chance that the NRB or Land Use Review Board will ultimately give us an exception to the rule and say we can mitigate? Because by rule, you can't mitigate prime ag soils. You have to get an exception. You have to apply for a variance. And that's the waiver process means it's going to be a risky process. You can't get that approval up front and then apply. So that's why, from my standpoint, I was like, the best thing we could do is to work ourselves out of the Act 250 process by getting ourselves into the growth center and then managing the process going forward, which may be either we're completely out or we can only do 74 units at a time until we, until we can build out most of the project or just track it as it goes and see how it goes. But that was what was going through our mind when we're looking at it. It wasn't willy-nilly making decisions that we want a growth center because that's going to be cool. It was actually directly comes out of exactly what we've been trying to try to work through to keep the project moving forward step by step. Obviously, if Act 250 wasn't a barrier to the project, the fastest thing to do would be to just move forward, find a developer and let the developer put together the Act 250 application. They do it all the time. I mean, it's not impossible.
So can I just ask a question about I guess this is something I'm a little bit confused about. So the growth center statute says that you have to like mention or something in the city plan a parcel that you're adding to the growth center. I mean, that doesn't make a
It
lot
would
of
have to be in, I think it has to be identified. I don't have.
Identified.
There's
I mean-
probably something that says it probably has something in here to the effect of the growth center shall be located. The growth center shall be identified in the city plan or something to that effect.
That doesn't make a lot of sense to me because things change.
Right.
And like the opportunity
Every
to buy
10
the
years.
parcel. So how would you don't change your city plan that often?
Yeah, and that's the difference where things get written by legislators and
Yeah.
then the rest of us kind of show up and go, and we're gonna have this conversation. I'm having it right now with Nick as we're putting together the draft maps for you guys to consider on, okay, if we have to have a designations map, we know we've got a designated downtown, we know we have a growth center. I can put those lines on that map right now. The proposed additions to the growth center, assuming that's what we move forward with. What should we do? Should we just add in the Res 9 neighborhoods in Country Club Road? Should we just add in the complying? In order to comply with the sections, you have to either have or have plans to build out all of the required infrastructure for smart growth. So sidewalks and these things like that. That's not a big lift and a big deal for Country Club Road. We already know that we're going to be putting those in. Those are already going into the plans. So it's already a requirement under zoning that those get built out inside. So in order we're not exempt from our own zoning, we're exempt from some things, but not that. If we build out Country Club Road, we have to put in sidewalks. That's just a requirement. So that's not an issue. What we don't have as a requirement in our zoning is that, and this came up with Isabel Circle, if you develop a property that's not adjacent to a sidewalk, you have to build the sidewalks inside your project. But you don't have to build the sidewalk that connects it to the sidewalk that's a quarter mile down the road. And that was the issue that some of the conversations I had with the state folks were like, we can approve what's on the ground right now because it's on the ground right now, but we can't approve these other ones because somebody might do another subdivision out past the Town Hill condos out there. But there's no connection that connects back down to the intersection of Town Hill Road and Main, which is where the sidewalk ends. There is some sidewalk that goes up Town Hill. So there's different, like we said, there's no requirement. That was why they were like, well, really stick to those. But for the plan, maybe we do put in the plan bigger because of the issue you were just talking about. We don't plan to actually apply to the state to put, I'll say Toy Town on the other side of I-89. We don't, it can't be in the growth center because there's no sidewalk. But we could put it in the growth center in our plan because if we built the sidewalk, we could then just go and put in an application and add it. So we'll have a conversation about that. What do we want on that map? Because we should probably think about adding more, because if we just put in what we think,
Yeah.
And then somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm the next property outside. I'm in rural, but I'll run the sewer, water and sewer. If you rezone me, I'll put new housing over here. And we'll be like, yeah, that's great, except I now have to amend my city plan to add that parcel in because of the requirements. So we'll have that conversation when we're doing the land use plan. So there's going to be a proposed future land use map. There's going to be a current zoning map, and there's going to be a designations map right now, as far as I can tell. Nick is working on those 3 maps. We'll build out those storyboards, so you guys will have that information to consider. And again, there'll be drafts and we can amend them, and then we'll get public comment and see where we want to go with those.
This is all really helpful background. I really appreciate all the information that you're sharing here. I just wanted to note that in my little bit of research on the growth centers, that I think the state of Vermont has 6 total. They are Williston, Bennington, Colchester, Montpelier, Hartford, and St. Albans City. And there's really only one precedent for an updated boundary. It has happened before. And the only precedent is in Montpelier.
It's in Montpelier.
Prior.
Yep.
So I just want to note that there's not a ton of precedent around this. So it feels right to me to be sort of consulting back with the board and the staff at the state level for their recommendations.
I had a few questions. Getting back to what Steve thinks that we should be doing, in my head, he thinks that we should be coming out with like something like this, like an actual plan.
Yeah, I think can I quote you just a couple lines from the statute? The growth center shall be located within or shall adjoin a designated downtown village center or new town center. That's a shall for the location. The whole concept here is walkability. And then uses, the growth center shall support and reinforce any existing designated downtown village center or new town center by accommodating concentrated residential and a mix and scale of commercial, civic, industrial uses that are consistent with the anticipated demand for those uses within a municipality and region. That characterization that the White and Burke report is a plan that we're going to keep building on is not binding in any way. It was not accepted by the council because we don't know whether that's what we want, whether we want townhouses and high rises and a tennis club. That community process still needs to happen to envision how we're going to use this property for civic and housing and commercial uses. You also, if you want a new town center, you can't have it compete with that other area.
So, I mean, this is my question though, because what I think Mike is saying is that this isn't going to happen unless we have developers who are interested in developing that, and they would only have that interest if it's part of the new growth center. Like you look at
it
how
is-
The TIF.
It is consistent, so it is consistent and
any
connected.
situation.
It is connected to the existing
Growth center.
Sabins pasture is in the growth center, and this property abuts to Sabins pasture. So it is connected to the downtown through that.
Yeah.
We also plan to connect the roadways through, so it's not just, symbolically connected through some line that would probably not meet the spirit of the rule if we weren't going to be planning to try to connect those roads on through. If it was just independently sitting out here, it wouldn't be supporting the downtown. But
I think, so in my head, I think I told Ari on this, there's a chicken and egg situation where I think Steve is saying that, no, we need to have this formalized plan before we can have a growth center expansion. But what I'm hearing Mike say is that this plan, we can't even hire someone to come up with a plan like this unless we have the growth center expansion.
No, because
Because
the growth
the
center,
incentives won't be in place until the growth center expansion exists. Developers don't.
there are
want to
different
develop here.
ways. So there are different ways of getting from point A to point B. And so one way is kind of, maybe Steve's alluding to it, you're asking about it, would be for us to go through and really kind of do the design work to the end. I mean, we've already recognized mixed use. That's why we rezoned this to be mixed use. This isn't zoned strictly for housing. It is zoned to be mixed use. We do hope it will be mixed use, but it is expected to be heavily housing for two reasons. One, we've got a significant housing shortage. We've got a lot of vacancies in our commercial space. We also don't want to be competing with the downtown. We do want to have neighborhood amenities, neighborhood stores that would benefit, a small restaurant out there, other things that are going to either support the recreation side or support the residents that live there, coffee shops. It's all going to be allowed. We expect that. And we could go through and design this a lot more and try to find a developer that says, build us what we want. And we gave these two options. That's option one to council. Council wanted to do option two. And I think it's a good way of going, which is we're going to lay out everything in broad strokes, in concepts, and we're going to go through, and some Tim Heaney wants to subdivide. I'm not sure. We'll have the council make a decision as whether or not we subdivide to make this available to private developers. We own it, but we're going to have conditions. Tell us what you're going to put here. We'll approve it and let you go forward. And we're going to do less of the design work and more of the review. Let the private sector, you hear the expression, let the private sector, we aren't private sector developers. So let developers come in who've done this in the past and done this in other places and said, this has been a successful model for us. We're going to use modular build, or we're going to use stick build, or we're going to hang steel, or we're going to, we're going to need a parking garage, or we're going to need this. And then we can go through and say, oh, okay, I can see how that works. Is this going to look like South Burlington's new town center? Or is this going to look like Essex town center? I don't know. We haven't quite got there yet. Both of them have a mix of commercial. Both of them have high densities. So there's a lot. I think one looks more suburban. I mean, if it were me, I'd be thinking South Burlington. But I wanted to have a little more urban feel, but it's not my call to make. It's going to be city council's and the public's call to make. But the process wise, we could do it that way where we put together the plan and say, this is what we want to see built. Or we can go and let the public kind of decide.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the statutes that we were all sent are growth center statutes. They are not growth center boundary expansion statutes because they don't exist. And because they don't exist, we've been going back to what it was previously.
That's what the statute says, that applications to amend a growth center have to be according to the initial application. That's the fundamental principle. That's why we have to do this holistically.
I think it's important to note that the growth center boundary expansions have only happened once. There's very little precedent for it. It has been successful once, and that was in Montpelier.
It was done in error because they worked on the policy that ignored the statute, and now they've revoked that.
There's a possibility, I think, the state would come to us and say, we don't have, nothing falls within the statutes for any expansions. That would, I guess, be up to the state to tell us. But if the state thinks otherwise, either staff or board, that there is a pathway through here for another successful expansion in the city of Montpelier, then I would hope that we would be able to listen to those recommendations.
The time is
I'm a little concerned. I just noticed that there are two people on the Zoom. Are they here for the public input session? Because I'm just noticing how much time we've spent on this. And I don't want to get away from the main intent of this meeting, which was a public input session.
Apologize to the people who logged in. We're still actually under general business. So,
yeah.
Can I close with two?
I think we should table this issue for now. I feel like we gotta keep focus on the city plan.
Well, let me-
And no, we're gonna table it for now. And move on to there will be another general business opening at the next meeting. So we're gonna just open up with the public input session and see if those two folks on the Zoom are I don't know.
Yeah, we have
Approach this,
two-
Mike,
two-
maybe you can
yeah,
help
we've
me.
got two folks on the phone. We're gonna be I'll just be starting to kick off the public input session on the city plan, 3 city plan chapters. Is there something else that you two folks wanted to discuss, or are you here to kind of talk about and to hear about the city plan? I think they can unmute themselves because everybody else has been able to.
Okay. Maybe they're just listening in on a fascinating planning commission. But I don't want to.
Okay, so I guess I was going to say, before these folks showed up, that everybody else has seen the presentation before and we can just go into the discussion. But I don't know if folks have seen it. So I will go very quickly
Okay, great.
through the presentation. Certainly, excuse me, for Tim's benefit too, because he hasn't seen the presentation. So there. So we don't all fall asleep. I'm not going to turn the lights out. I think you guys have all seen this before, but for folks online and hopefully folks on your phones can see, we're going to go through the city plan virtual input presentation. This should only take a couple of minutes. It'll help to give you an outline of this process. So a little bit of background and history. What is the city plan? We'll discuss the different chapters briefly, and then a little bit of the overall process. And then we could talk a little bit about the rest of tonight and how it's going to work. If you're looking for the city plan, where to find it. If you go to our city's main website, go to montpelier-vt.org, and you scroll down, they've got a bunch of these boxes, and sometimes you've got to hit these little carrots over here, these little arrows. And if you find this one, you can click on it. And when you click on it, it'll take you to a page which has a number of symbols like this and a number of points like this. And so every chapter comes in 2 pieces. So here you'll see there's a historic resources with the bell and a historic resources down below as a PDF. So the historic resources up top, if you were to click on this one, it would take you to the storyboard, which is a discussion online with maps, and helps to describe why historic resources are important and kind of gives you a big overview. The click down below, the PDF, is the implementation plan, and it's much more specific, much more wonky, and really gets into the details of what exactly are, very specifically, what are our goals and what exactly are we going to do to accomplish those goals. And we'll go into this in much more detail, but one of the key things to remember, for every chapter, we have 2 pieces. We've got a storyboard and we've got an implementation plan. So a little bit of the background. For 50 years, we've been calling our city plan the Montpelier Master Plan. And for various reasons, a master plan is a term of art in landscape architecture, in engineering, in planning. And what we have is a city plan. It is not a master plan. So for this update, we've changed the name. It will be the Montpelier City Plan. But just, you'll sometimes hear people refer to it as the master plan. That's why, it's because for 50 years it's been called the master plan. It was most recently updated in 2010 and amended in 2017, but we moved forward with a completely new format and content. And so the new format is, this is going to be, well, let me start first with the process in 2016. We started this by developing the goals and strategies for each one of the chapters. And the chapters, those eventually went on to become the implementation plans that you see. The web-based plan format, so rather than have a printed document, the PDF, the 300-page plan that most towns have, we decided to move forward with a web-based plan format, and those are the chapters. And we decided to go with a separate chapter for each topic. Our current city plan, the Montpelier Master Plan, has like 4 or 5 chapters, and everything is kind of glommed into big subject areas. That makes it very difficult to work through and find things. We split it back out to the 12 chapters because they tend to align easier with statute. We can go through and have those conversations. Also, it's easier just to come through with aspirations, goals, and strategies. If you're just talking about housing, what are our housing goals? As opposed to having something called the built environment and trying to come up with something that's going to talk about a number of different things. So by breaking it into pieces, it makes it much easier to have a conversation. What are we going to do about housing? What are we going to do about energy? What are we going to do about transportation? What are we going to do about land use? So what is a city plan? Why is it important? Well, first of all, plans are not required under state law. They're not required, but they are needed if you want to adopt or update your zoning. They are needed if you want to participate in Act 250 and Section 248. Section 248 is the Public Utilities Commission. So if we want to participate in their proceedings, we have to have a city plan that's in place. It's also a necessary requirement for many state and federal grants. But if we want to have a city plan, then we have to meet these 4 requirements. And those are it has to meet the state planning goals. It has to be compatible with the regional plan. It has to be compatible with other plans in the region, and it has to contain the 12 elements that are in 24 VSA 4382. So we also talked about having 12 chapters. You see there are 12 element requirements. It's not a 1-for-1, but that's a big reason why there are 12 chapters. So how can they be used? Well, once you have a city plan, it has to contain those requirements, but how you use it is really up to the municipality. It can be a long-term guide. You see all of the things here. And it really depends on how we want to use it. Ours, for example, really isn't set up for participating in Act 250. We don't get a lot of Act 250 permits. We don't have a lot of policies in here that apply to Act 250. So ours tends to focus more as a long-term guide, decision-making guide, and action plan. So our goals, and we kind of went over this a little bit earlier, the storyboards, those broad views, was to give the public and decision makers the background on a topic. What are our goals? And generally, what are we going to do to achieve them? So it really was trying to focus in. Its storyboards tend to be mapped. They are developed using what's called Esri is the company. Their product, they're a map-based company. And so a lot of this is telling stories through maps and stories and pictures, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to explain why is housing important, what are the issues, and what are our goals, and what are we going to try to do to achieve them. The second piece is to get this out of my way, is to have strategies, detailed strategies for an actionable plan. The one criticism we got, and the criticism I have of our existing plan, is it wasn't very actionable. We wanted to get away from supporting and encouraging things to really get down to what are we going to do to make accessory apartments? What programs or projects or new regulations do we need to pass to get different goals accomplished? So that was the 2 things we wanted to do: make it an online plan so that way it's more accessible to the public, gives people the information they need to have an understanding. And if you wanted the details, we have an actionable plan that would really get in, that our committees can then take forward. Our housing committee should have this housing plan, our housing implementation plan, and so forth. So they know what our plans are and they can start building that into their 8-year plan. So the overall process, 12 chapters. and the planning commission decided we would review 3 of them at a time over 4 to 6 months. It's actually taken 8 months, 9 months. But we do 3 chapters at a time. We are currently looking tonight at the 3rd of the 3, and then we'll have 3 more coming up. Each will have different input opportunities. Once completed, the planning commission will review comments and make revisions. We have a list. We have it in an Excel table of the comments we've received, and we go through and make a decision point on each one to go through and decide whether we make a change. So we take the public input seriously. So if you have thoughts, we want to hear about it, because we will review every comment and make a decision of whether we make the change or don't make the change. I mean, won't guarantee we make changes, but we will guarantee that we will consider the change. And when everything is ready, we'll have a public hearing process. So this is just the public input process. The hearing process will happen once we've gotten through all of these chapters and heard from everybody. So tonight we're looking at natural resources, public safety, and community justice. Public safety and community justice are 1 chapter, and then economic development. And as we mentioned, 3 chapters. Each one of them has 2 parts. Each has a storyboard. Each has implementation strategy. All the pieces are on the website, with the exception of 1, economic development, which we talked about last time, had been taken down that day. And I communicated with SE Group, and they were going to be getting it back up, and they didn't. And I've got to go and find out. I think she might be out. So I think that might be why we haven't been able to get that one put back up. But they had taken it down to make updates, and it hasn't been put back up. So the other pieces are there, but that one is not. So each storyboard follows a similar organization, and we'll go through that. And each implementation plan starts with aspirations, then has goals, and then has strategies. And this is what each one looks like. So you've got transportation plan right here. This is what a storyboard looks like. And you'd be able to scroll through reading and getting information. And over here's aspirations, goals on the right-hand side, and the different strategies. Each strategy has a box and priorities, costs, who's responsible, and a little description. And so the rest of tonight, I'll leave the PowerPoint and bring up the storyboards and strategies. We can walk through them. It really is up to you. We've kind of used a lot of time, so we're not going to go through all of the storyboards, but I can pick which one we want to go through or which ones we want to go through, and we can talk about them and take input. But if you have any questions or want to email anything, you can get in touch with me, Mike Miller. So it's mmiller@montpelier-vt.org, and I can go through and answer those questions, and any input I will bring back to the planning commission. And they, as I said, they will consider it. I'll put it in what we call the matrix, and we will go through each one of the comments. And I will stop sharing.
Okay, great.
Place away. Oh, stop sharing. There we go. So, is there a preference from commission or from the public? I don't know if Joanne or the other person on the phone or have a specific area of concern or questions or comments. I want to make sure we give you opportunities to make sure I've got host tools unmute themselves. All right. Well, yes, you should be able to unmute yourself. Yeah, so there shouldn't be anything that blocks those.
Maybe we just give it just a minute or two and see if anyone.
Said otherwise I can.
Okay. It's like there are not comments, but I just wanted to make sure that we covered that. I mean, I don't think we need to cover the storyboards if there's no comments, but
Yeah.
I don't.
I have comments, but I don't need to see the storyboard.
Okay. You can go ahead.
On public safety, I've mentioned before to most of you, but Tim wasn't on the commission then, about regional dispatch. We spent many years, I think since 2016 or so, convening a regional public safety authority to share resources and dispatch, and it faltered on governance. And there is a state level task force wrestling with this issue and a report that won't be out till January. But no matter how the state report comes out, there's going to be a need for regional governance. The guidance has been coming from the federal government, the Computer and Information Security Administration. CISA has put out information about the need for governance of communications for public safety. And we have failed miserably, both at the state level and at the regional level and at the municipal level, because we entered into a agreement with Capital Fire Mutual Aid 20, 30 years ago, which formed a governing body made up of our fire chief and police chief and city manager, and the same for the Capital Fire Mutual Aid system, which is basically a bunch of firemen who share responses to each other's fires. But that governing body has never met once in 20 some odd years. There's no minutes, no agendas, there's no evidence that that body has ever met. And we've had real problems with dispatch, antennas going down because and nobody noticing for weeks on end until somebody from the phone company points out that, you know, that transmitter's not up because the line went down, or a dispatcher not connecting the record of a person who's in psychological distress, and at the second response, putting two rifle rounds in him and killing him.
I think you did share this, and I assume that Mike put this in the matrix of public comments. I'm also trying to remember, was there a specific thing that you wanted to put in the city plan about dispatch, or?
Yeah, I think that the city needs to support a regional model of dispatch without being committed to owning it and having an unregulated monopoly on the dispatch service. And it has to do with who owns the radio system and who among the served towns might decide to hire a different operator, which is currently not possible because the city generates $400,000-$500,000 in revenue off of this, and they don't want. In any case, I think Kim Cheney, the former chair of the region of the Public Safety Authority, I just called him, but he's not able to navigate. He's 80-something years old. He's not able to navigate a Zoom link in this rush environment to get into your meeting. I mean, theoretically, you could email him the agenda and he could click on the link, but.
Okay, well, I think we could include in the matrix, part of your recommendation is maybe following up with Kim Cheney or about a recommendation.
Anyone can send us comments. If Kim
Yeah.
just wants to
Oh,
send me
right.
written comments, he's
Yeah.
welcome to send me
Yeah.
written comments.
Well,
too.
a couple other public safety dimensions would be the safety of the bike path, because that's where you do have jurisdiction of how, and it will necessitate that you address the fact that every place that the unhoused population has congregated, the city has repeatedly taken it away. It was the gazebo down by the other bike path bridge down behind DMV. and it was removed. It was put on the empty lot on Main Street and it was removed. And then the bus shelter, right in front of Shaw's, and it was removed. This city has a real habit of removing any place that the unhoused people convene. And
So would
It's-
your recommendation be like a day center, or what would your recommendation be?
no, I don't think you can categorize or lump all the unhoused people together. One, people should be housed, but two, you need a diversity of places where you can get out of the rain. If assume we're always gonna have some number of unhoused people for whatever reasons, you need. I mean, that I've got photos, they've started chaining off the pavilion porch. Folks were, but just before the flood, people were living under that porch and the tents got washed out and people were sleeping up on the porch.
So a diversity of sheltered outdoor
Yes.
places, okay,
Yes.
is your
And-
recommendation? Okay.
And another that has to do with public safety is the fact that we, despite repeated advice from CISA at the federal level, that we should get off of the .org domain, because we're forfeiting by staying at Montpelier-VT.org. We're leaving ourselves exposed to computer attacks, which could totally disable all our IT systems. And the protection that's available with a .gov address through layers of security and filtering and expertise warrants moving off of this .org. We are not a .org, we are a gov. And we should just get with the program and quit masquerading as a .org. It was a bad decision back then and it needs to be corrected. And it was raised with city council, but it would have more weight if it were in the plan. That we're extremely vulnerable by not availing ourselves of the extra added protection that's available by being a .gov address.
Okay, well, we have about 10 minutes left. And if you have other comments, you're welcome to email them to Mike about those 3 chapters. I just want to cover a few more, kind of plan out the next meetings and consider the minutes and,
Well, I didn't get a copy of one of the chapters you're discussing tonight because of computer glitches, so.
the economic development?
Yeah.
Okay,
So I think you should schedule that for a future meeting.
Well, I mean, anytime these chapters are up, when we get to the next 3, we've had people come in earlier in these 3 to talk about arts and culture
Okay,
because they
yeah.
weren't here. I
so,
mean,
right. the
when
next-
we do the next 3 chapters, it's,
Okay,
we try to focus on those 3 chapters, but if there's anything specific,
yes,
I
great.
don't expect that to be down. I mean, it may not be back up till next week because I don't know if our consultant is back before Thanksgiving or not, because I haven't heard back from her. so,
Okay, yeah.
Stone Environmental?
No.
So thanks, Mike, for sending us the draft resilience chapter text. I think that was on our email. And there's copies here, I think, right, that you provided.
Can I ask a quick question to Mike? Looks like we can't use the Google Drive approach to doing edits on that anymore. Is that correct? And if that's the case, I'm trying to remember what life was like before COVID. I remember the old days of just sitting around the table and just kind of going line by line and making edits as a group. But I guess the long short of it is I've been working on some proposed red line edits to the storyboard, and I'm just wondering what's the best way to get that to the group going forward if we can't use the Google Drive anymore.
So in the past, we would, as Aaron points out, we would sit around and write by committee. And it was long and slow and laborious and painful. And eventually what happened was usually Kirby would end up just taking the lead and going through and doing basically a red line, in some cases wholesale rewriting things, some cases just going through. The framework kind of has to stay there, which Aaron knows, the introduction, the planned context. So one option is everybody takes this home, chews on it, and then brings back comments and we kind of talk through it. They can send it all back to me and I can compile them, or we can have one person, if you know, like we said, in the past, it was Kirby who would just kind of take it and do once through. So it had my thoughts and then his wordsmithing. And if Aaron wants to go and jump in and do the wordsmithing, and the idea is that in this case, this was kind of put together with a couple of framework pieces, one of which was emergency management breaks into 4 pieces. So I broke this chapter into 4 pieces. It's resilience, but it's also emergency management, kind of a merging of those 2 topics. So it really kind of breaks into response, recovery, mitigation, and preparedness, which is the way the federal emergency process works. So we look at each piece discreetly, the response being what is actually happening in the event just before. We know it's going to flood. We've got a prediction of flood. What are we doing just before and during that flood event? Let's say.
Mike?
So, yep.
Could you just tell us what, I mean, I started going through it. I didn't get through the whole all the goals and aspirations and stuff, but I read some of the text. Can you just talk about the process that your team went through to get here? I know there's kind of an unofficial community that exists out there. You referenced them. Who provided the goals and aspirations, and who else has looked at it, I guess, besides the city staff?
So far, I put together the framework. I put together all the goals and strategies. I used the existing plans. I don't just make these up out of thin air. There is a plan right out there right now called Maple, which the Resilience and Recovery Commission put together. And I looked through all of the things that we are doing to kind of put these things into different boxes based on those 4 requirements. So I put it together. I've sent it to John Copans. He is reviewing it with his staff. They have not set up a time. We talked about setting up a time to have me meet with them. But for now, he's working with his commission to go through and look at what we have. But he's only looking at the implementation plan. He's not looking at the storyboard. So I'm kind of, as long as that is framed with these 4 steps, as long as we keep with these 4 groupings, you guys can work out the storyboard and it should all fit together. We'll have to talk about the 4th bullet, the implementation summary. Obviously, if they change the implementation summary in some significant way, we would have to go through and amend that summary. But the other pieces are laid out here. So that's who's reviewed it. So in the past, in the past, other chapters were always done by the committees that were responsible for them. So housing did the housing chapter, transportation did the transportation chapter, energy did the energy chapter. In this case, resilience, we've sent it to them for updates.
Okay. Yes, I would probably favor like a time limited, like we all have a chance to look at it and then come to a meeting and give our edits, or I don't know whether it's better to send our edits to Mike, but then if they're conflicting edits,
I know.
that's where we get into trouble.
So we're really not allowed to use the Google Drive.
Nope, that was allowed. There were a lot of COVID waivers that were given to get through stuff, but then afterwards the Secretary of State came through and said that having everybody work on the same document online is the same as meeting in person. So it is a meeting without an agenda and minutes and all the pieces. So
Is there anybody who would feel comfortable taking a first stab at it? Because Kirby's approach was actually really helpful. He kind of give us something that was, there were some edits too, and then it was just a little bit easier to kind of work through the whole thing. It's not my area, but
I was gonna say I'm about halfway through the document already, and I've got some pretty heavy duty redlining in it. So I'm happy to do that and get that redline draft to everybody if they're agreeable with that. Consistent with sort of past practices, I usually do my edits. I think Mike always has a very good sense of how to structure the storyboards and so I try not to mess with any of the concepts, but just sort of move the language around a little bit to tighten it up. So that's usually my goal. So if people are comfortable with me doing that, I can get that done and get a new draft, everybody. I'll probably send it out like over the weekend after Thanksgiving, because nobody's going to be doing any of this work for the next few days anyway. I don't think so.
I think that'd be great.
If
Okay.
you send it to me, I can send it to everybody and that avoids issues. And then you guys would have it in advance just to, not to talk amongst yourself with, but to be able to review those changes. So when we meet, we can kind of be all up to speed on it. And
Right.
for the new folks online and here, writing these things is not my strongest skill. I've got a lot of skills. Creative writing is not one of them. So I've always said no pride. So if you guys see edits that you're like, let's go and reword this, you're not gonna be hurting my feelings. Go forth and
What's that?
beat it up.
You've done the hard part. so
I know,
you're-
it is the hard
that
part.
exists
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
create something from nothing, so the fact
Exactly.
that something exists makes it
Exactly.
infinitely easier
Yeah.
for us to then tweak it.
I always find responding to things is always easier than giving people a blank sheet of paper and trying to write it. So, but again,
Yeah.
and Kirby knew this and Aaron knows this, if there's a wholesale redlining because I'm not being clear, my wife will tell you, I don't know where you're trying to go with this, but you're not doing it. So clear it up.
Just put it this way,
I'm sure it makes perfectly good sense in my head, which it does.
I've been on the commission long enough. I know exactly what you're saying in every juncture. So I just
Wow.
I just try to massage it a little bit. That's all.
Yeah, just make it so
Okay.
everybody else gets it.
I-
It all makes sense in my head. So
So I have a question. I have also gone through it and I just like did my usual adding comments on the side. So am I not allowed to send that to Aaron?
no,
Because
you
that would
can,
be like meeting, I can.
Just send me your comments and I'll incorporate them into my red lines and we'll have a comprehensive
What is
document.
that?
yeah,
Where's the line of like coordinating too much outside of?
Simultaneous editing.
I think it's the open.
If you don't have a quorum, then I think you're okay. If there's
Yeah.
only a
Oh, so
couple,
it's
like
just
when we've
between
done other
Aaron.
things,
Yeah,
we've had
everybody-
small groups of 2 or 3 people.
Yeah,
Work
if
on it.
everybody
Okay.
put stuff together and sent them to Aaron and he compiled them, then
Okay,
that's not an issue.
That sounds
It's
great.
when we have an open, a share doc, and at some point legislature will have to get around to addressing the 21st century because everything is now in shared docs.
Yeah.
And that's just how everything works nowadays, but
Okay, great. So everyone will who has comments maybe can send them to Aaron by this weekend.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how about we do this? I'm just gonna work on my red lines alone, and then if everybody can get me everything by the end of the weekend, that'd be helpful, and so I can get hopefully a draft out
Great.
on Monday or Tuesday next week. So.
Okay. And I think we are only probably going to have one meeting in December, I'm assuming, because I think
Yeah.
the
entirely up to you guys. I don't have my calendars in
I
front of
think
me to know if
is
the
the
second
fourth-
one is landing on the 23rd or something
yeah,
absurd.
I feel like the fourth one is the 23rd, which seemed unlikely, but maybe I don't have my
yeah,
calendar.
it's the 23rd, the 9th and 23rd.
Yes.
I'm not available that week.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
yeah, so expectation is we're meeting on the 9th.
Okay.
We can talk about. It won't be a public input
Okay.
session. It'll be a working session, so we can review the comments that we've received. Maybe we can get through a quick chunk, because we don't have a lot of. Remember in the first 3 that we did, we had housing and we had like 89 comments on housing. And then
Yeah.
the second 3 we did, we had about 80 comments on energy. This time we'll have, 10 or 12
Okay.
comments.
And so we should
We
send out
might be able
the
to review those.
matrix again, because I assume Tim didn't get it. The matrix. of comments
I will
we've
send
received.
out,
Okay,
I'll send
great.
out the matrix with
Okay.
the updated comments for these 3 chapters. And
Okay,
then
great.
we'll review the resilience.
Okay. Good. Well, I'm glad we're gonna have a working session. Excited.
Oh.
So if anyone wants to quickly move approval of the November 12th minutes, if you second to review them.
And I have 2 changes. I am 99% sure Aaron was not here for the 12th.
Oh, yeah, neither was Brian Mills.
And Brian Mills
No.
wasn't on the commission, so those two
Huh.
were not here.
I move to accept the minutes with those edits.
Okay, do we have a second?
I think Steve spoke at the general business too. There's something about Laura LaRosa who's here.
Were you here as the
No, I
last?
wasn't.
No, you
Not
weren't
the
here.
last
You were
one.
here.
Oh, it was
before.
Tim Heaney. Okay, never
Oh,
mind.
okay.
Never mind.
Yeah, it was Tim Heaney and
Second approval with the changes.
All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
great. And then I would accept a motion to adjourn.
you have said motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
yes.
You too.
Happy
Thanks.
Thanksgiving.
Gabe.
What I want is to